Today on the GlobalView Podcast, I've got the pleasure to welcome Kevin Streater. And Kevin is the Vice President of ForgeRock University. ForgeRock is a leader in identity and access management software solutions. And so welcome, Kevin.
Great to be with you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it. How are you holding up with the pandemic?
Not sure I've quite noticed it yet. We've been so busy, ForgeRock. It's been full on. Everyone wants to do digital identity at the moment. So the fact I haven't been able to go outside, it's like the rest of the family's noticed, but it's just been so full on that it's been very difficult to actually get beyond just being busy all day. So
well, that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good place to be in, a good industry to be in at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. We were talking a little bit before we started the recording, and you were mentioning that, and very fortunate to be in this space, right? So it's awesome news.
Absolutely, and it's like, who thought that everyone was going to need to be online all at the same time?
That's it.
A lot of organizations had been thinking about, okay, do I need to get my business online? If I haven't, I might do that in a year or two. Or how do I help my employees start working from home a bit more easily? And then suddenly everybody had to do it at once.
Yeah.
And first thing that comes up is, how do I make sure that's secure? How do I make sure people have got access to the right resources? It's just the funnel, just sort of everything opened up, and it's just been crazy ever since. So
well, good. Well, here's the hoping. Here's the hope in 2021 is a busy year for us all, but also a year where we can once again get back outside and meet with family and friends and colleagues and things like that, because that's definitely something that I really miss.
Yeah, and it's been a long time since I've been able to come meet anybody, and I think it's probably at least 2 years since we last got to meet, and it's like I just can't get out, can't do anything.
That's right. At a SEDMA event, I think that was. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, well, the first question I had for you today, Kevin, was just to maybe tell me a little bit about, ForgeRock University and how the organization has evolved over the last few years.
Well, ForgeRock started 10 years ago. Well, we're just coming up for our 11th birthday. We actually came out of the takeover of Sun Microsystems by Oracle in 2010, where a lot of us in ForgeRock used to work for Sun Microsystems, and Oracle didn't take on the Sun identity and access management product line. And it was an open source product. So founders of ForgeRock just sort of picked it up and started a new business. And that was 5 people 11 years ago. Okay. We're just over 700 people now, global organization, pretty much every part of the world. And ForgeRock University really got going about a year, 18 months into the company's founding. We literally started with a blank sheet of paper because we'd all come from another organization. We couldn't bring anything with us, so we had to start creating course materials. We had no tools, we had nothing. And that's where I came in to sort of set up ForgeRock University and really create a global training organization that could represent the best of what ForgeRock does and get people to learn our products. So it was unusual because I could go and find vendors that I really wanted to work with, but I could also pick up some of my old contacts and take advantage of the organizations we'd worked with before. I guess Gilmore and yourself fall into that group of people that I know from the Sundays, and I've had a chance to put together a whole set of technologies so that we've gone from teaching one class. I think we were doing one class a month in the US at the beginning. We're now doing 10, 20 classes a week in multiple locations around the world, with a big training partner network. But right at the core of it, I've been able to put a very consistent model where every student, doesn't matter who they go to for the training, all our partners, they get the same books, they get the same lab experience. Everybody gets the same learning from us wherever we go. And I think that's been something I've been really pleased with ForgeRock University. Is everyone, I know the experience all our students get, and I know it's a high quality, really standardized, best of class learning experience that everybody gets.
Excellent. Yeah.
But yeah, that took me probably 3 or 4 years to build all the components. and get all the systems in place. And then the last 3 years or so, it's just been growth, and more growth. And some days I think, how do we get to the point where we've got training going on right the way through India, through whole of Asia, right the way around the US and Canada, all at the same time? And it's like, that started from nothing. And,
it's got to be very rewarding.
Yeah, I sit back some days and just think, that's been a really good business to grow, and I can see this constantly growing. Now I'm starting to shift my attention to sort of, okay, so how do we scale it from here, and what do we do next? But it's been a great journey so far.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, no, you've really experienced some pretty explosive growth. We've seen it certainly working with you over the last few years. So hoping to see that continue on into the future here. One of the questions I had, I mean, you've got a ton of experience in the training and education space, and I wanted to get your perspective on some of the emerging trends that you're seeing in customer and partner education, either within your organization or just in the industry in general.
I guess my experience goes back quite a long way now. So I was in Sun Education in turn of the century, and it was all classroom based. There was no remote learning, very, very traditional classroom training. Over the years, we've sort of gone, it sort of started looking at sort of some things going online, some things doing a sort of mixed hybrid thing. And I guess the things that worked really well, what I've picked up is the hybrid classrooms is something that has worked really well, where you've got some instructors in the classroom, or you've got an instructor in the classroom, you've got students joining either in the classroom or remotely. We did that sort of shift 5 years ago, and it's become the norm for everybody now. And it's like people say, but how long did it take you to get into hybrid learning? And it was, it didn't take us very long, and we did it about 5 years ago. And it's been great because that's really helped fuel our growth over the years. So now I'm looking at sort of, okay, so where do we go? And a couple of things I picked up. One is that there's still a desire in the high tech, new leading edge technology world for people to get their hands on. It's so important to get their hands on, because it's like ourselves. We've just launched ForgeRock Identity Cloud Platform, cloud-based service for identity. What's the first thing everybody around the world's looking for is to get their hands on it. Where do you get that from? You get that from a training program. So even now, there's a constant need for hands-on training. But what's changing is the delivery of the instructional side of it. Some people want it really heavily customized to their environment. So that's the sort of the private training business, where custom content and customizing it to a particular customer's requirements or environment is really important. But the more generic sort of the sort of basic get started training, everybody wants that in smaller chunks now. So we're now starting to go down the path, rather than having a course book that is for a 5-day classroom course, that everything's in there. Actually, what we probably need is 5 one-day courses. Mm-hmm. Each one is self-contained. So people can say, okay, today I'm going to assign this day to go and learn how to do this piece with ForgeRock. And tomorrow I want to go and learn this thing over here. Much more modular. Still want the same depth of hands-on experience. Still want the same quality of product and books and everything to go with the class, but much smaller pieces. I think some of the online platforms are getting very good at delivering video content very well. But what we're really having to look at is, how do you couple that with the lab experience and the depth of material you need to transfer? Because our standard sort of 700-page technical training course books, it's still going to break down into 5 120-page books. It's still a lot of content to deliver. So that's where we're going, sort of looking at new delivery models, but more agile, more broken down into easier bite-sized chunks, but still delivering the same depth of content. And
Yeah.
I think that's really challenging a lot of people in the industry. And I think a lot of conferences have said, yeah, breaking down video content, great, we got that. But now, how do you break down that hands-on bit as well?
Right.
That's going to be a whole different challenge.
So when it comes to foundation level courses, the basic, basic level courses, do you think that one of the things we're seeing is, a shift towards, subscription-based learning platforms and more self-paced learning for some of that foundational type of learning? As you get into the deeper learning and the certification level stuff, typically that still, especially in a highly technical product, that still requires, an instructor and a class, whether it's virtual or non-virtual, whatever the case may be. But do you sort of see, a subscription type of a model sort of coming into play over the next, a couple of years?
Absolutely. I think everything is moving towards subscription models. I think there's been a maturity in just understanding what a subscription is, because it's everywhere now. All of the entertainment platforms are all subscriptions. We're used to it for cell phones. We're used to it for everything. The idea of what is a subscription, most people have got now, and they're getting the idea that video content, particularly introductory, should be on a subscription basis. The question I've always got is, how far can you take that before you've really got to work out how do you bring depth in?
Mm-hmm.
I spent 4 years working at the Open University in the UK, which is, they have an average of 250,000 concurrent students that they're delivering distance learning to, with a lot of depth as well as a lot of video. And it's quite an interesting model they've got. And it's sort of, trying to bring that into technical training world is going to be something I'm going to try and attempt to do over the next couple of years.
Interesting.
But it's all going to be in some form of subscription, because subscriptions are the way forward.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks, Kevin, for that. Yeah, that's interesting. Now, one of the questions I had, and I think we've kind of already covered it, was, the virtual instructor led and the move to that, and how, you've adjusted from a COVID standpoint to a complete disappearance, essentially, of live instructors. It sounds like that was really never a problem for you guys, though, because you were already there, right?
It's a question that I've been asked many times. It's been a question that's come up in so many industry groups, and been interviewed by a number of analyst firms that say, how did you manage to do that transition through COVID so quickly? And it was like, it's because we didn't actually do a transition. 5 years ago, we moved to a completely hybrid model. All we turned off was the classroom, and we carried on teaching.
Yeah.
My instructor pool is global. My master instructors in Norway. I've got course developers in Australia, in the US, in Canada, in right the way across Europe. We never had an issue with it. So literally, we didn't miss a heartbeat when COVID happened. In fact, I kept monitoring the class statistics every week with the whole team, going, when are we going to notice something? And we went through April, May, no, nothing changed. Then we got into the summer. I thought it's going to change now. Actually, we grew 25% last year.
Yeah, that was the funny thing. I remember being on a call with you back when I think it was probably in April or May, because I think everybody was concerned initially on that call. I remember you guys talking about how you'd actually seen an increase in the number of students, which was obviously a pleasant surprise for everyone, right? Yeah. So it was great.
And it carried on all year. And actually, I think what we found was people have found time to engage with learning because they haven't been able to do other things.
Yeah.
And actually, they've used their time more wisely and said, actually, this is a really good year to learn. Let's go and do some of that learning that I should have been doing, right the way across our customer community, our partners, our internal staff. Everyone's been doing more learning. No, it's been really good. Unfortunate situation globally. It's not what we would have wanted, but actually we were in the right place already. Obviously, I think this is the benefit of having really thought about the training business, as I said earlier, that I thought about a global architecture of particularly learning technologies and platforms that would work on a global basis, no matter what the situation was, because in some parts of the world, certainly in India, most of Asia, people want to do face-to-face training. They like the personal contact.
Yeah.
You then go to some countries and they just want to do virtual, but you get little pockets. So good example we found, actually one country that has really surprised us has been Germany. There is no culture of distance learning, to be trusted as an expert partaking your knowledge. You have to be in the room.
Interesting.
And this applies across universities, across anyone that's trying to deliver complex training. And there's just very little adoption of virtual learning. We've really struggled to get the hybrid model to work in Germany, but the rest of the world has been very comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So it's been very interesting to see how culturally you have to have capability to have learning in lots of different styles, and then you can actually ride some of these bumps,
right?
And you're well set up for them. And obviously the Vital Source platform we've got with you, and it's like everything was in place, and it just worked. It just carried on working exactly as it was before.
Yeah, excellent. So one of the things I do hear from customers is that while training, especially on the technology side, training has continued through the pandemic, and that's been good. A lot of organizations have cut their training budgets because obviously they've been struggling. Not all industries have weathered the storm as well as the technology industry has weathered it. And a lot of these organizations, whether it's, in finance or oil and gas or whatever the case may be, they all also have needs for technology related training ultimately as we come out of the pandemic. And as budgets start to return back to normal, once the pandemic is over, do you think that there's going to be a pent up demand for training going forward, running maybe into late 2021 and as we move into 2022?
I do. I think there's a lot of, I think we've seen a very significant cultural change. It's changed how people work. It's changed how technology is seen. Just look at the growth of people like Zoom. Everybody I know now knows what Zoom is.
Right.
18 months ago, I was the only person that even knew what it was.
Yeah.
Sort of my social group was like the idea of holding a meeting online. It was like, my wife does an online choir over Zoom. A year ago, that would have been unthinkable. I think we've seen a massive technology shift that it means everyone's going to want to engage with technology that's relevant for them. But just learning in general, it's been a great time for people to learn. We've all had to learn new skills, whether it's learning to manage when you can't go out and get groceries at a minute's notice. You've got to plan. You've got to learn new skills. So I think that massive shift is going to have a long-term impact on just learning, that we're more open to taking on new skills, but it's also left a huge legacy of sort of learning deficit, that there's a lot of things people need to learn and want to learn. Now, hopefully we'll see that going forward. And I think learning new skills is coming back as a subject people are willing to talk about, because we've all had to do it.
I certainly have. That's for sure. I've learned a lot through this. And it's amazing how businesses have been able to pivot to make it pretty easy, honestly, to adjust, right? Yeah. It was difficult at first, but business really does move quickly to change.
It was all there. It was just untapped, because I remember in some systems, 20 years ago, we were working from home, a very early stage technology, but we had flexible offices. We didn't have fixed desks. I used to be based in the London office. Well, there were 400 people for about 60 desks. We were doing this type of thing. So actually for ForgeRock as a company, it was just in our DNA. And literally we all just went home and carried on.
Yeah.
The infrastructure, everything was set up. I think a lot of organizations did know how to do this. But now they've actually realized that actually this is the way forward. There's a lot of rethinking, because I'm very close to London, and I think a lot of the financial world is just having to rethink everything they're doing. and we're going to be all moving to a whole different way of working.
I think I agree with you. Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how that what the impacts are on things like commercial real estate and things of that nature, as large offices are sort of maybe a thing of the past in some ways.
But I think it's also highlighted the importance of when you do need to meet people.
Yeah,
you still need to have relationships with people. It's just the setting might be slightly different.
True. True.
So we're now trying to sort of, as a company, trying to think about what's the new workplace going to look like for a company that's actually largely been built off working remotely.
Yeah.
And it's going to be much more about bringing teams together, and it may be around doing training together. It may be around doing sort of group activities together. These are the social times when people come together and network and get to know each other. Maybe learning's coming back into the center of everything.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a very interesting take. You said you spent some time with Open University, and one of the things that we see with a lot of our technology customers is vocational training is becoming bigger and bigger, and they're trying to essentially grab students either early on through academy programs and universities, or grab students when they're sort of making career transitions and shifting from maybe a non-technical background to more of a technical background. So you've kind of got an interesting perspective, I think, coming from that space or having experience in that space. What do you see the role of vocational training and sort of the IT academy as being in the training space going forward, and technology specifically?
I've spent my career actually working in both environments. So I started in academia, then I went to work for Sun Microsystems, and then I went back to academia, and then I've come to ForgeRock. And actually, it's a very supportive environment. There's some big conceptual things people need to learn. That's really well done by traditional education. But you've also got to learn the practicalities of applying some of these things. That's where IT academies have come in really well. It's where technical training providers have come in. There are two different things going on. There's conceptual and there's hands-on. Everybody can do a bit of both. And I think we're just constantly seeing the learning environment moving on. So what I took from the last 4 years at the OU before I came to ForgeRock was the universities were trying to get into the vocational training space at exactly the same time that the vocational training organizations were trying to get into academic learning. You need a good mix of theory and practice, but the vendors like ForgeRock, we're always going to be ahead on hands-on because that's what we do. We're developing the software,
right? But
we actually need to partner with the more traditional academic organizations, colleges, and to embed that in their learning so that we can move forward.
Yeah.
And it's that progression that everyone needs to engage with. The technology that was leading edge for me 20 years ago was things like Java. Sun had created Java programming language. The only place you could get Java training was from Sun. It was the leading edge.
Yeah.
Now you can't find a training organization that doesn't have some form of introduction to Java programming. But we've all moved on another 20 years worth, and we're now dealing with new things. And I know that some of the technology we're teaching today in ForgeRock University will become the place of IT academies, universities, not us, in 10 years' time.
Interesting.
But we're already looking at how do we apply AI to things like identity. But that's come the other way. So particularly in universities, a lot of work, really good work is being done about how do you apply artificial intelligence, machine learning to complex problems. Well, we've got a complex problem called how do you make sure people have got the right permissions for the applications they're using? That used to be fairly small numbers. Now we're dealing with tens of millions of users. You've got to apply some form of AI and machine learning to it. So we're pulling that in one direction. that's where we'll be in 10 years' time.
Right.
So I see it as all a very, very combined ecosystem. But if you're in an organization that's not changing and not developing and not trying to move forward, you're probably going to become history.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about, okay, so how do we move our learning forward? I like going back to the Open University, because when they started, all of their learning was done using TV broadcasts and radio broadcasts.
Interesting. I did not know that. Interesting. Okay.
And nobody believed that could be used to teach academic qualifications. It was actually they nearly didn't get started because nobody believed that could deliver quality higher education. Today, 50 years on, they're actually using VitalSource, they're using video, they're using very complex websites, they use nothing like it started.
Yeah.
All of those technologies have all come from the commercial training world.
Right.
So it's one big ecosystem. And that's what I'm always looking for as well. It's like, we need to move forward, but we also need to help all the other training organizations learn how to do what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because we're going to need them in the future. We need the vocational experts to be developed so that we can move forward.
Interesting. Yeah. So one of the interesting things actually that you mentioned there when you're talking about AI specifically is, so, you're incorporating AI is going to become an important part of the products that ForgeRock is building.
Yeah.
And there are organizations out there that are, teaching, courses in AI and things of that nature. And I'm curious about, merging, or curation of content, I guess, in some ways, that's unrelated to your core products, but that is complementary to your products. Is that something that, you think about in terms of, how do we start to roll in other complementary types of training into our own offerings, and how do we combine those in a way that is elegant for the student to consume?
And I think this is one of those destinations we're heading towards in the future. Is you can't live in isolation. The technology world is moving too fast now. That I'm dependent on a whole range of other providers. So, for example, our cloud platform is entirely built on the Google Cloud Platform and Kubernetes. So all of my students now need to learn these technologies before they can use what ForgeRock's created. But actually, that's not content that we're experts in. So actually, we need to work with the AWS's, Microsoft's, Google's, to help understand. Our students need to understand their technologies. So I think that there's going to be a lot more information sharing, course sharing, community of learning, where we're all dependent upon each other for success. And I think accessing content that supports the curriculum is going to become increasingly important for organizations, because I look at the work we're doing in the AI space, as you say, Matt, and that's all based on a number of projects from other vendors. But the classes we're going to build are going to be dependent upon students knowing those technologies. But actually, again, it's just an evolution, because all of our previous products were dependent on people knowing Solaris or Linux or Windows. Or we don't talk about that anymore. We now say you've got to know Azure or Google Cloud or AWS. It's the same problem, but yeah, we need to have access to more content, and the curation of it is becoming the core skill. In fact, there's a book I was reading last year, which was just on curation is the 21st century skill. We need to learn how to be really good at curating content that's relevant for us, and being able to do it in multiple domains.
One of the other things that is really important when it comes to training is student engagement and keeping students engaged in courses. And I know that that's something that you are really heavily involved with at ForgeRock and have been for some time. In fact, you wrote an article about that and how to keep students engaged. So Just talk a little bit about that, about how, what are you doing to keep students engaged and to keep wanting to learn?
Yeah, this is something I got onto a couple of years ago, and I was thinking, why is it that students normally turn up, they do one course, and then we don't see them again? I've got all these nicely laid out curriculum pathways and lots of different learning opportunities, and what's missing? And it took me into the world of digital credentialing, sort of digital badges, because one of the things people are looking for these days is recognition, but also feedback, but not 6 months after a course. They want it immediately. So something that we put in place was as soon as you finish a course, you get a digital badge for attendance. But part of issuing that badge is that you then get recommendations about what's your next course, what other things should you be thinking about? Should we be recommending going and learning about something from another vendor that will help your next step?
Yeah.
So it's that combination of providing some immediate feedback and recognition that yes, you've done some learning. It was high value learning, and that you can get some recognition from your peers for having done that.
Yeah.
It counts towards something that might be a bigger goal of yours. So working through a certification path for us, for example, or we've got a whole program for our partners that leads through to accredited consultant. How do you get to an accredited consultant? Well, you do this badge and then this badge and this badge. And when you get to that top badge, you can really make some noise about that, because you've now achieved something that's got real status in the ForgeRock technical community. So sort of laying out that progression as you go, we sort of, particularly in technical training world, we forgot to tell our learners how to progress in styles that actually work for them.
Right.
The old days of having a training catalogue with nice laid out course paths doesn't exist anymore. People don't know what to do next unless it's put in front of them.
Yeah.
So I think that combination of continuous reward and recognition, but also continuous guidance together, really helps people encourage the engagement with learning, with the learning process. And certainly for us, it's helped us increase the number of people that are working their way right the way through learning paths significantly. So we just say, at the beginning of the learning process, we just say, do you want to do this learning path or this learning path? And you say, right, I'm going to select this one. We then provide a portal that shows them their pathway in terms of how many badges have they completed.
Yep.
Which optional badges at each stage. And then we give them a nice dashboard at the top that says, you've done 6 out of 12 steps. And you've started now introducing a bit of that gamification into it.
Right. Which is effective. Yeah.
And it's very simple, it's very subtle, but it's effective. And people then say, well, the way we do it is we say, okay, you've got 6 out of 12 badges in order to do your core curriculum. But actually, did you know there's 18 badges that you could collect if you want the whole set?
Yeah.
That's relevant. And you suddenly find that everyone's now going off trying to do the whole 18 because they want to get the full set.
Yeah, that's right.
And with very little effort, we've sort of stopped talking about learning paths and individual courses when you're saying, how are you progressing on the AM path? What achievements have you reached so far? Oh, you're somebody who's got the full set of badges. Great. Well done. You're a totally different language now, but it's really engaged the learners. And it's driving a much greater uptake of just continual progression through learning. But actually, this came from the academic world. Why would you start doing back to the Open University? A bachelor's degree typically takes 7 years because you're studying it part-time online, and you do it module by module, and you get a recognition at the end of every time you finish 2 modules, you get a certificate or a diploma. It's the same reward and recognition model,
Yep.
guiding you through a pathway. Why don't we bring that into commercial training? That's where it came from, and it's really helped grow. And it's now meant that I now talk to a number of academics. Go, that's really clever stuff that you've done, and I just go, well, I borrowed it from the academic community.
Right. I never really believed that badging worked that well. And then I've had recent experience with this because I got, and this is a totally different application, but I got an Apple Watch for Christmas actually. And so it's got, the fitness tracking on it, and it tracks your activity and how much you're standing and all this kind of stuff. And there's just something about every day just being reminded, that, have you achieved this today? Have you achieved that? And you just, as you go along, if you do 7 days in a row, you get a little badge and something feels good about it. So I can see how that can keep you coming back and coming back for more, right? It's like you said, that gamification and just sort of enticing people to want to keep on following along the path, because sometimes the big goal at the end is so far away that it's hard to continue to chase it and stay motivated. But if you've got the little pieces that keep you going, ultimately you end up in the same place, but it really keeps you motivated to keep achieving. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and it's engaging the learner and helping them want to learn. And it goes back to all the ideas about lifelong learning. And I think the technical training world particularly got very lost in the standardized, solid, big book that you had to teach in 5 days in the classroom. And actually, we lost the fact we're trying to encourage people to continuously learn across a whole range of technologies, across a whole range of media. It's about learning far more than it is about the individual point product.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you want to learn, you can keep learning.
Well, especially nowadays,
it's success.
Yeah, especially now with products changing as rapidly as they are, right? I mean, you achieve a certification, you know the product inside out. Well, in a year from now, you may not know the product inside out unless you're working with it every day, right? So you do have to have that continual learning type of a culture, really, and thought process. Okay, well, that's all the questions I had related to learning today for you, Kevin. I do like to I introduced this on the last podcast I did, and I like to, to have a bit of a lightning round, I call it, where I sort of ask some questions to get to know Kevin Streater a little bit better. The first question I had on the lightning round was, you travel quite extensively when it's not a global pandemic for your work, so. What's your favorite city to visit that I know that I think you call London or the area around London home, right?
Yeah. Let's say globally, the two cities that always stand out. Sydney was one.
Okay.
But actually, my favorite city of all is Boston.
Really? Okay, interesting. Why is that?
Sun used to have an engineering center there that I used to go to frequently. And the seafood in Boston is just amazing.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like, so my wife and I, a few years ago, went on very fortunate to go on the cruise on the QE2 just before it came out of commission.
Oh, nice.
And we stopped off in Boston. I said, there's only one thing we've got to do. We've got to go and find some really good Boston seafood, legal seafood. And it's like, I've spent so many hours in that place.
Well, I think we may have already answered the second question. I don't know. You let me know. I was going to ask what your favorite kind of food is. What if there's any ethnicity or type of food that you love more than any other.
It's traditional English.
Okay. What is traditional English? What would be a traditional English meal?
Sunday roast beef. Roast beef, roast pork. I spend my weekends trying to perfect my roast beef recipes, and I've got a smoker out in the garden. I've been learning how to smoke. Really nice food.
Excellent.
And those sorts of cuisines. But it sort of goes along with seafood as well.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good. That's good. No, Sunday roast is fantastic, and smokers are becoming so popular. I think with people staying at home and wanting to cook themselves, I think smoker sales are through the roof. Yeah. So that's fantastic. Let's see, what's another one? Well, so what is something that you've been doing through the pandemic that's helped you keep your sanity? Is there anything in specific that you've done that sort of let you stay sane through this whole thing?
Yeah, one of it is the smoker in the garden. The other is gardening, which has just shocked my wife.
That's a great new hobby then. Hopefully that'll continue once the world returns to normal.
Yeah, I've sort of made in one of the online groups I've been part of. I said it was the end of the first lockdown in the UK, and they said, "What are you going to carry on with post lockdown?" I said, "Well, it's going to be continuing to do the raised bed and the vegetables and gardening, and I've sort of made a public commitment now that I'm going to carry on doing it. So now I've got to do it."
Yeah, that's you'll have a fantastic garden. That's great. Well, listen, Kevin, that's I think that's all I had for you today. I really, really appreciate you you spending the time with us on the GlobalView podcast, and you've been a great guest, a lot of great insights, and really appreciate your time.
No, it's been a pleasure, Matt. It's been great to do this, and yeah, always enjoy having a conversation with you, and look forward to meeting again.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.